Years before Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider, Batman lost his parents, and Deadpool broke the fourth wall, there was the Phantom, the first masked comic book hero. Now you would think that with that kind of bragging right, the Phantom would be all over the place, especially in an era where comic book characters are an easy way to print money. And yet, outside of a cheesy 90s film starring Billy Zane and a short-lived cartoon that took the character to 2040, nobody seems interested in going back to Bengala. That's a shame, because there's more than enough room in this world for a globe-trotting hero that goes on a bunch of swashbuckling adventures. And to prove that, first-time developer Art of Play has turned the long-running series into a fun throwback beat-em-up. It's like Final Fight and Streets of Rage, only with more boat chases and elephant stampedes. Find out how this comic book brawler stacks up when I review The Phantom. After watching so many comic book movies lately where the fate of the entire world rests in the hands of a masked hero, it's actually kind of refreshing that the stakes in The Phantom are relatively low. Not low for the Phantom, of course, because this particular adventure revolves around his son Kip being kidnapped by the dastardly Dogai Singh. Now, it's up to either the titular hero or his wife Diana to travel the span of the globe in search of clues for Kip's whereabouts. Equipped with a gun, an animal helper, and some incredible fighting moves, the Phantom dons his iconic purple outfit and punches and kicks the bad guys until they cough up the information. This is, for better or worse, a classic side-scrolling beat-em-up. You know, the type where you walk from left to right, mashing the attack button to knock out photocopied enemies that like to hide off screen. It's the kind of brawler that Capcom or Sega would have released in the late 80s or early 90s, back before one-on-one fighting games were all the rage. Now, as a brawler, the Phantom has a little bit more depth than you might expect. For one thing, it has two different attack buttons, which allow for some very basic combos and a little bit of variety. There are also a number of rushing, charging, and even counter moves, as well as the ability to pull out your gun and shoot the enemies from afar. And did I mention that the Phantom and Diana have their own animals that they can unleash on unsuspecting bad guys? Kit calls in Devil, his trusty wolf, while Diana lets the hawk swoop in and take some cheap shots on the enemies. The two concerned parents make their way through 5 different countries, ranging from the jungles of the fictional African country Bengala, to the rooftops of India, to the mob-filled streets of New York. Each country is split up into several different stages, giving the developers the freedom to show off completely different spots in each country. For example, when the Phantom arrives in Sweden, the first thing he's going to need to do is fight on a moving train during a snowstorm. Thankfully, the weather's all cleared up by the time we get to our second stop in Sweden, the docks, where the only storm is coming from his fist hitting those comic book villains. The third and final stage in each country is the boss fight, which sees our hero jump into some sort of vehicle and chase down a number of comic book baddies. This starts out with an exciting chase with our heroes chasing down an airplane with a horse. You'll also hop onto motorcycles, boats, and cars in future stages, usually with the conceit of trying to shoot bombs and grenades out of the hands of the boss. While a little simplistic, these chase scenes go a long way to break up the usual beat-em-up action. Look, the truth is that you likely made up your mind about this style of brawler a long time ago, and the Phantom is not going to change your mind. It suffers from all the same problems that plagued the older games, which you'll either find to be annoying or endearing depending on how much you like this genre. It's honestly probably pointless to complain about enemies hiding off screen or some of the cheap hits you'll take because they swarm our heroes from all sides. That said, I did find the repeating enemies to be a bit jarring. Yes, this is a hallmark of beat-em-up games, but it feels especially egregious here. Because there are only a handful of bad guys, you'll routinely get a screen full of the same enemies acting the exact same way. Let me tell you, some palette swaps really would have gone a long way. But as it is, it feels like you're fighting the same 5 enemies in every single stage. And that's disappointing. There are a few other problems that I wouldn't necessarily blame on the genre, such as the somewhat sluggish control. Yes, the Phantom does have a few more moves and abilities than a game like Final Fight, but it's also a lot stiffer and it's not as easy to control. This is especially bad when you're trying to turn around fast enough just to counter the enemy sneaking up behind our hero. Even simple things like pulling out your gun and putting it away can sometimes be a pain. The characters never move as fast or fluid as they need to, leaving you vulnerable at the worst possible times. Of course, it doesn't help that the game is buggy. While it never crashed on me, I did run into a few sections where the enemies would get stuck in the level and I couldn't proceed. The Swedish train level is especially bad, as enemies could get stuck on top of one car with no way to move forward. This leaves them just out of reach for the player, so you might need to restart the entire stage if you don't have enough bullets. There were other times when our hero would freeze or even walk around without arms. None of these issues are game-breaking per se, but they are annoying. Now, on a more positive note, the visuals are fantastic. If there's one thing that Art of Play gets right, it's the comic book style. Everything from the characters to the backgrounds look like they were pulled straight out of the pages of the classic comic. They're hand-drawn and beautifully rendered. There are also a lot of nice touches, as well as fun nods for longtime fans of the series. I especially like how the cinemas are presented and how certain combos and gameplay moments will trigger pop-up comic book panels. Although the animation is a little stiff, this is overall a very sharp-looking game. Despite being a bit clunky at times, I was ultimately won over by the Phantom because it gets the fundamentals right. There's enough depth to keep the action exciting, a lot of locations to fight through, and plenty of incentive to go through the story multiple times. Best of all, the chase sequences are genuinely fun and exciting, offering a nice reprieve from the punching and kicking. While his adventures may be rooted in the past, this game proves that the Phantom is not too old to star in his own beat-em-up. Not bad for a comic hero that's pushing 90. I'm not sure the video game version of the Phantom moves faster than lightning and is stronger than a stampeding elephant, but don't let that stop you from playing this thoroughly enjoyable brawler. Featuring beautifully hand-drawn graphics that look like they were ripped right out of the comics, this globe-trotting swashbuckler is full of cool locations to fight in and exciting chases to survive. Unfortunately, the sluggish gameplay, repetitive enemies, and frustrating bugs hold this game back. But fans of the Phantom, Brawlers, or both will be more than satisfied with this adaptation. Here's hoping this isn't the last time we see Kit Walker don the purple suit in a video game. Hey, thanks for watching my review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's the best comic book game? And yes, I will count Comic Zone, even though it is not based on a comic book. However, that video for Aha's take on me does not count because, well, it's not a video game. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with reviews of both Rendering, Ranger, R2 Rewind, and Shadow of the Orient. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,